So this next section is about x and y intercepts and graphing with x and y intercepts. This should be really easy because we already talked about x-intercepts last semester and when we were solving for zeros or setting it equal to 0. So we're going to refresh our memories and hopefully this is an easy one for you. So first of all, the x-intercept and the y-intercept. We already know what the y-intercept is. That's our beginning point when we graph. And we said that we begin graphing on the y-intercept. So that is my y-intercept. My x-intercept is where it intersects the x-axis. So here is my x-intercept. So the point at which the line intersects the x-axis is called the x-intercept. So I'm going to circle that in red because that's my red point. The point at which the line intersects the y-axis is called the y-intercept. And remember, that's my b value when I've graphed in y equals mx plus b. So what I want you to think here, and this is what we did last semester, is we said, at this point, what is my y value? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my x value is 8. My y value is 0. All along this line, my y value will always be 0. On my y-axis, here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My x value is 0. But my y value is 8. And along any of these points, my x value will always be 0. So graphically, that's what it looks like. So if I asked you to find the x-intercept of an equation, all you're going to do is you're going to set, if I'm looking for the x-intercept, I'm going to set my y value equal to 0 and solve. If I want to find the y value conversely, then I'm going to set my x value equal to 0 and solve. So let's look at that. If I want to find the x and y intercepts of y equals 3x plus 6, remember, my x-intercept, I'm looking for my x value, but I know my y value is 0. So really, I'm just going to put y is equal to 0, solve for x, so I subtract x, both sides, divide by 3, and x equals -2. So my x-intercept is -2, 0. That's my ordered pair. And then to find my y point, I'm going to set x equal to 0 and solve for y. So 3 times 0 is 0. That covers up. And then y equals 6. So when x is 0, y is 6. And that's it. To find your x and y intercepts, you follow these directions and solve, and then you can graph those 2 points and connect the dots. So that's what we're going to be doing here. All right. So on these, I kind of want you to pause 1 through 3, pause and see if you can figure it out on your own, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so on your x-intercept, I'm going to go ahead and put these up because I know my x-intercept, my y value is 0, and I know on my y-intercept, my x value is 0. So that helps me, 1, it's going to help me get the answer, and then 2, it helps me figure out, okay, what am I plugging in where? So to find my x-intercept, my y value is 0. And now I just solve for x. Subtract 5, -5 equals -x. You can't have a negative, so that's the same thing as dividing by a negative or flipping it. So divide both sides by -1, and I get 5 equals x. So now my x-intercept is 5. All right. To find my y-intercept, I know that x is equal to 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. And -0 is not really, so that just cancels out. And now we have y equals 5. So 0 and 5. Okay? All right, look at number 2. If I want to find my x-intercept, remember, x-intercept, your y value is 0, and on the y-intercept, your x value is 0. So if I want to find my x-intercept, I'm going to plug in y as 0. So y becomes 0, and now I just solved for x. So I add 8 to both sides. 8 equals 1/2 x. I do the multiplicative inverse, where I multiply both sides by 2 over 1, which is just 2. And now I get 16 equals x. Obviously, the symmetric property, x equals 16. And so now my x-intercept is 16. All right. Now to find my y-intercept, my x value is 0. So y equals 1/2 times 0, which just cancels it out, because 0 times anything is 0. And what does it leave me with? Y equals -8. So y equals -8. Bam, that's my x and y intercepts. All right, we'll do one more together, then we'll start the graphing. So x-intercept, this is where I tell myself the x-intercept, my y value is 0. The y-intercept, my x value is 0. So I'm going to do that right away so I don't get confused. So now I plug in, if I'm finding the x-intercept, I plug in 0 for y, and I solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 2. I'm going to go up here with it. -2 equals -4/3 x. And now I solve for x. So I'm going to do the multiplicative inverse. I'm going to multiply both sides by -3 over 4 by -3 over 4. Those cancel out, and it gives me x is equal to 1x. And then here, negative times a negative is a positive. 4 and 2 reduce, and I get -3, positive 3/2. So remember when I said make sure you know how to multiply fractions and a whole number since the beginning of the year? This is where it comes in handy. So my x-intercept is 3 over 2. If I want to solve for my y-intercept, my x value is 0. So y equals -4/3 times 0 plus 2. But anything times 0 cancels out, and I'm left with y equals 2. Bam. Okay? So that's x and y intercepts. You can even do it when it's in standard form. So when it's in standard form, it's the same concept. I'm still going to go over here, and I'm going to say, okay, when I find out my x-intercept, my y value is 0, and on my y-intercept, my x value is 0. So it's the same thing. So here, if I want to solve for my x-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for y. And remember, anything times 0 just cancels out, and you're left with 3x equals 12. Divide both sides by 3, x equals 4. So that's how I get my x-intercept. I like doing these better in standard form because you just cover one up and solve for the other. So for my y-intercept, my x value is 0. So my x value is 0. Anything times 0 covers up. I'm left with -2y equals 12. Divide both sides by -2, and y equals -6. And that's my x and y intercepts. Okay? All right. We're going to do some graphing. So now I'm going to do the same thing I did above, but now I'm going to graph it. So here I'm going to do my x-intercept, just like I did up there, y-intercept. So it tells me my x-intercept, my y value is 0. My y-intercept, my x value is 0. That way I can't get confused. So now if I'm finding my x-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for y, which really just covers it up. And I have -4x equals 20. Divide both sides by -4, and x equals -5. So that's my x-intercept, -5 equals 0. Now let's solve for my y-intercept. My y-intercept is when x equals 0. So here I'm going to plug in a 0 for x. And what does that allow me to do? Cover it up. 5y equals 20. Divide both sides by 5. And y equals 4. So now that I have these 2 points, I'm going to graph them. My x-intercept is -5, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My y-intercept is 0, 4. Those are my 2 points. I take my ruler, I connect my dots, and I go all the way through the paper. Okay? All right, let's do number 10. So same thing. X-intercept, what is helpful is for me to make my ordered pair. So the x-intercept, my y value is 0. The y-intercept, my x value is 0. So now let's plug in. If I want to find my x-intercept, my y value is 0. So basically that just covers that up. Divide both sides by 2, and x equals 7 halves. It's okay to have a fraction. The world is a fractional world we live in. All right, and my y-intercept means my x value is 0. So I'm going to make x 0. I'm going to cover it up. I can't have a negative y, so I divide it by negative. So divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. It just flips them, and I end up with y equals negative 7. Now, some of you are probably going, well, how in the world am I going to graph 7 halves? Well, think about it. 7 halves, 2 goes into 7 3 whole times with 1 left over, and 2 is my denominator. So this is really 3 and 1/2. I can find 3 1/2 on a graph. Here is 3, 4, so halfway between is my point. And then my y-intercept is 0, negative 7. And then I graph my line. Voila, just like I would. Okay, so that's graphing with x and y intercepts. Hopefully it's easy and it's a refresher. If you're struggling, come and see me.